episode number 83. You can get all the show notes and resources at dadhackers.us/083.
Now, the most important part of what I do for a living that I think is the value of this phone call is the preventative work that I do. Because see, when I'm hired by, I don't know, USA Track and Field, okay, we want you to give us some instruction, Greg, on what to do to protect children. Because it's predictable, this is what I would have you put in place. Now, that same type of an analysis is valuable if you're talking to a dad, okay? Like, let's don't go to a track meet. Let's go into your home. What does the risk look like in your home? It's predictable. And because it's predictable, let's talk about how to prevent it.
What's up, Dad Hackers? My name is Patrick Antonucci, and I am the host and founder of this podcast and community of Dad Hackers. Dad Hackers is a community of Christian fathers who are devoted to encouraging, equipping, and enabling one another to become the men that God has created and called us to be, so that we can raise up the next generation of fully devoted followers of Christ and leave a legacy of multi-generational faithfulness. Now, on this show, we primarily interview Christian men to dive deep into their experiences and insights into what it means to be a Christian man, a Christian husband, a Christian father, and a Christian leader. We ask questions that dig deep into the thinking and rationale and experiences of these men so that we can all learn and grow into the men that God is calling us to be. I'm so thankful that you've joined us today. Make sure you subscribe so that you never miss any of our value-packed episodes. Also, please make sure you leave an honest review if you're listening to this in iTunes or any other platform that takes reviews. Reviews boost the show's ratings, which means that more dads are going to come across our show and benefit from the content that we put out. I also wanted to let you know that we do have a free private Facebook group just for Christian dads. So after the show, make sure you hop on over to the show notes. There's a link for that in there as well. Okay, Greg, thank you so much for joining us today. How are you doing?
Doing well, man. Thanks.
Awesome. So I'm really excited to have this conversation. I think this is a very, very important topic, and a topic that doesn't get talked about enough. I think it's in the back of our heads as husbands, as fathers, as leaders in our home. And the information that you're going to share with us today is vitally, vitally important as dads for us to know how to protect our children from sexual abuse. But before we jump into that, I'd like you to Greg, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do, and just give us some context of where you're coming from.
Beautiful. I'll just stay at 30,000 feet, and if you want to know more, you can ask me more. How about that?
Sure thing.
Okay. I practice law in Fort Worth, Texas, and I've been practicing law for about 30 years. Now, my primary area of practice is child sexual abuse work. Now, I'm not a prosecutor. What that means, I'm a civil trial lawyer. I deal with lawsuits. Okay? So somebody wants to file a suit because somebody got hurt. In the realm that I work in, it's just child sexual abuse matters. So now, professionally, we can talk a little bit more about that in a minute, because more importantly, I'm a believer. I'm in church leadership. I'm in my 25th year of student ministry at Christ Chapel Bible Church in Fort Worth. And I'm in ongoing relationship with dozens and dozens of guys at various ages that I've invested in their lives and continue to have a shepherding role, or what has grown into really just a friendship and a peer role, after all of those years. So I am also a dad. And so this to me is not a statistic. It's not a number. It has a name and a face, and her name is Georgia. So these are issues that we've walked through when our child was a toddler, when our child was 8, when you start addressing those issues, like when do you leave them overnight with a family member? When do they go overnight with a friend? What about this birthday party? Then what about high school? Then what about youth sport when she's in team travel? Then, so she's a beautiful 22-year-old. And so those issues are not mine anymore to shepherd, but I'm eager to be a part of other dads that are in that role.
Awesome. Awesome. And I'm looking forward to getting into some of those details about how we can protect our kids at those different age levels and in those different contexts and social situations. But I'm curious, what does it mean to be a sexual abuse lawyer? How does that work?
Yeah. Let me try to explain that and then kind of use that as an on-ramp to why that's valuable for men to understand what I do and the viewpoints that I've gathered through what I do for a living. As a civil trial lawyer, see, I'm not a prosecutor. I'm not dealing with the criminal prosecution of somebody who's a sex offender. I'm a civil trial lawyer. Now, why that's unique for the conversation that we're going to have, Patrick, is I stand over train wrecks, okay? Something went wrong. And somebody's going to invite me as a trial lawyer to evaluate what went wrong. And so whether I'm invited there by a victim or a victim's family, or whether I'm invited to that train wreck by a church board of trustees or elders, deacons, or whether it's an insurance carrier, one way or another, I'm going to get invited to that train wreck. And when I am, I'm bringing with me a lens. Okay. So it's a lens in legal speak it's a standard of care. Another way of saying that is when I stand over that train wreck, I'm bringing an expectation with me of what you should have been doing to protect children. So whether it's a camp, I'm going to stand over that train wreck at that camp, and I'm going to bring with me a lens of what should a reasonable camp had been doing to protect children from sexual abuse. And when I stand over that train wreck and start evaluating the facts, oftentimes what I find is this is what you should have been doing. This is in fact what you were doing. And if there's a difference between what you should have been doing and what you were doing, that's what gives rise to liability. We call it negligence, sometimes gross negligence. So the point in all of that is when I stand over hundreds of train wrecks for the last 30 years, there are patterns to these train wrecks. Now, a lot of people don't like to think about child sexual abuse. I wish I didn't have to think about child sexual abuse. But this is just the uncomfortable place on the wall in Christendom God has called me, not just for the church, but I work for secular organizations. I wrote Safe Sport for the United States Olympic Committee. Okay, I'm one of the experts in youth sport for all of this drama that's unfolding, regardless in whatever form or college, university, mission organization. Okay, so when I stand over these train wrecks, what I see is there are patterns to these. So I'll be a nice guy. Some people will start telling me this is the circumstance. But see, by the time you give me sentence number 2, I can likely finish your story because it's predictable. Now, the good news and the value of the conversation we're going to have, Patrick, is if it's predictable, it's preventable. Okay? That sounds snappy. That's what's on the lawyer's coffee cup. Okay? If it's predictable, it's preventable. So what I would have loved to when I stand over these train wrecks is have the ability with my magic wand, if I had, to back that train up 6 months, 9 months, 2 years, to be able to show them, here's when you were having your problem. It started way, way back when. Here's where your train was shimmying. Here's when it hopped the tracks. You just didn't get to see it until this particular moment. All right. So in backing that up, that's what I try to do on the preventative side of my work. So I stand over the train wreck oftentimes when there is a crisis, but I do a lot of work with entities through how you met me through Ministry Safe. The secular side's called Abuse Prevention Systems. We do a lot of work with camps, schools, education, nonprofits, churches, to be able to design and implement safety systems for organizations. And the reason why I can do that is because, again, it's predictable. I know how someone's going to give it a go with a 3-year-old. So if your program serves 3-year-olds, I can show you what you need to do to put barriers of protection in your program. Okay. Now, the last piece of what I do as a civil trial lawyer that's a sexual abuse lawyer is I'm a crisis manager, okay, or a crisis response expert. So when people get in or near the ditch, I'll get an average of 4 to 5 phone calls a day where someone has a problem. I know we got disrupted on the last time you and I were supposed to visit because somebody wound up in the ditch. Okay, so I try to help. Now, sometimes those phone calls are people just needing a push. Who do I report this to? Is peer-to-peer sexual abuse reportable? What do I do with a circumstance when it's a staff member that it happened 10 years ago? Okay, so it's oftentimes a multifaceted crisis with people not having much of a manual as what to do next. Now, the most important part of what I do for a living that I think is the value of this phone call is the preventative work that I do. Because see, when I'm hired by, I don't know, USA Track and Field, okay, we want you to give us some instruction, Greg, on what to do to protect children. Because it's predictable, this is what I would have you put in place. Now, that same type of an analysis is valuable if you're talking to a dad, okay? It's like, let's don't go to a track meet. Let's go into your home. What does the risk look like in your home? It's predictable. And because it's predictable, let's talk about how to prevent it.
Yeah, I mean, this is going to be really good. I mean, you're right. I did first come across your content through Ministry Safe. I'm a leader in our local trail life organization, and we have to go through a sexual abuse training. And I'm also a high school math teacher, and I've been through many sexual abuse trainings over my years. And this one by far was the most eye-opening and most informative and most professionally done training I've ever seen. And I just walked away, in one sense, kind of never wanting to let my kids leave the house again. But in another sense, thinking, man, a lot of dads aren't going to come across this information because a lot of them aren't in a position where they're going to come across this type of training. A lot of dads aren't teachers. A lot of dads aren't in some sort of ministry position where they're going to have to do a sexual abuse training. They may have to get sexual abuse clearances, but they might not have to do a full-blown training. So I reached out to you, and I'm so thankful that were willing and able to hop on and talk to us. So that's a good point for dads. So as a dad, and for the dads listening, where do we start? What are some predictable and preventable things that we can do to safeguard our families?
That is a great question, and it has an answer. But the challenge with that question, Patrick, is there's like 2 or 3 questions that need to be asked and answered first. Okay? It's almost like you just jumped into step 4. And the reason why this continues to be a problem is because we don't get it. And it's not only do we not get it, but you see, Patrick, we're holding on to some myths. There's a way we already live life. There's a way that we already do child protection. If you're a dad and you're watching this podcast, chances are you care a great deal about your kid. That's why you're interested in making sure I can get equipped and get tools and resources to navigate through this uncomfortable environment. Okay, so at least the folks that are engaging with us care enough to receive information and sit through this. Okay, that's an incredible first step. But what I'd first want to let my people understand that are now, it's like Greg, I'm teachable. I want you to show me something. What I first need to show you is this is how you're already rolling. Okay, this is the way you're already naturally wired to do child protection. And some of the ways that you're naturally already wired are part of your problem. Okay, so there's not just information you need, there's some deprogramming that needs to happen first. Okay, so I'm going to do that in steps like 1, 2, 3. But what I want to do in advance, right off the bat, is I want it to check the back of the math book. Patrick, what's at the back of the math book?
The appendix.
No, come on, Patrick. The answers are at the back of the math book. Okay?
Oh, the math. I thought you said map. The math book. Yes, of course.
No, we don't do math book. Who does math books? Okay. At the back of the math book is the answers.
Yes.
All right. So now at the back of the math book, it didn't show us how to work the problem, but it at least gave us in advance, this is the answer to the problem. So as we're struggling with something hard, we know where we're supposed to land the plan. Okay. Right. We know in advance that if we're getting closer to the answer, I can give it the extra push to get there. All right. So the answer at the back of the math book as it relates to the problem involving child sexual abuse is the grooming process. Okay. That is your key. That is the answer at the back of the book. Okay. Now there, I've given you the answer, but I understand I haven't worked the problem. So that's what I want to be able to do. I want to show you this is why we're failing at this. In other words, here's what we're believing that we do that helps us to do the wrong things. Let's identify some of that error, get it out of the way, and then give you some of the good information that we need to be able to navigate an awful environment with kids that trust us. All right. So the starting place is first, what is it that I'm doing wrong? What am I holding on to? So here's a big idea. We start with the first big idea, Patrick, and here it is. Okay. What we believe shapes what we do. All right. Tracking with me on that? All right. What we believe shapes what we do. It's not unlike the gospel. All right. When we look at this, what we believe shapes what we do. What I have found in standing over 30 years worth of train wrecks involving child sexual abuse is the problem is not that we don't love our children enough. Okay. The problem is that we believe wrong things or not enough of the right things. And therefore, here's how it works. If you believe wrong things, you do wrong things, and you get into predictable ditches. All right. So the first thing to do in standing over these train wrecks is just, it's clear the couple of big errors, misconceptions that I'm holding on to. One relates to the size of the problem. Okay. Size of the problem. Now, anybody looking at me in the face saying it's a misconception, Greg, because you're a liar and it's not a big deal. Okay. It used to be in 1998, 1999, people tell me, no, Greg, it's all good here. Like, really? Yeah, Greg, we're not Catholic. You know, they just let those priests get married. They leave those little boys alone. By the way, that's messed up, right? Really, the way that comes across where it becomes a problem is people telling me, Greg, I want you to know, this is who we are. Sexual abuse is a big deal out there. Okay? Sexual abuse is a big deal in that community or in that socioeconomic group or in that racial group, that denomination. You're going to tell me who your community is, what your family looks like, what your church looks like, and you're going to tell me how it's somebody else's problem, and I'm here to tell you you're wrong. Okay, I'm here to tell you that the statistics tell us that there are 60 million sexual abuse survivors in the U.S. Okay, given a population of 300 million people, that's 1 out of 5 Americans was victimized before he or she was 18 years old. And that number is set to grow when we understand that 1 out of 4 girls will be victimized before she's 18. Now, I don't know about you, Patrick, but I've got somebody that calls me dad, so that automatically this takes on a name and a face, all right?
Oh, yeah.
But she's a girl, okay? Boys, 6 guys will be victimized before he's 18. Now, the guy number is more difficult to refine. Some of the studies say, no, it's 1 in 4 guys straight up, just like the girls. Some of them are 1 in 5. I took the conservative 1 in 6. You see, it's more difficult to refine because guys won't tell you. Okay? Guys don't report. Now, 66% of sexual abuse victims don't report until they're adults, comma, if ever, comma, especially not guys. All right? So this is a problem that we truly don't understand how big the problem is. And here's why that leads us to an error. Okay? Let me put it to you this way. How am I naturally wired to do child protection? All right, let me give you an example. This is the way it usually unfolds. Let's say that, when my kid was little, say she's 7 or 8 years old, my kid had some energy unlike any other human on the planet, okay? We had to go burn some of that off before that little girl would sleep at night. So I knew where every park in Fort Worth was. We either had to find a park or a pool, depending on the time of the year, all right? So I'd take her to a park. I'm sitting on this bench looking like I'm a normal dad, and I'm watching my kid just run around like a wild Indian. All right. So even though I'm sitting on that park bench and I look like I'm just chilling, what am I really doing, Patrick?
You're watching over your daughter. You're looking for threats.
Whether it's conscious or subconscious, I am always evaluating her environment for something that might alert me to the fact that there's a problem. And if I'm not alerted to a problem, what do? I stay in my position of comfort and relaxation. All right. But let's say, for example, I hear somebody in my peripheral hearing saying, oh, honey, let's let the dogs off the leash. What do I immediately need to know?
You need to know where your daughter is.
I need to know where my kid is. I need to know what kind of dog, and I need to know how many there are.
Yeah.
Okay? So let's say I look around behind me and it's a couple old teacup poodles. Like, I'll snap their little necks. No threat. Okay? So I'm going to evaluate the circumstance. And if I determine it's got a threat level, I'm going to decide how big it is, and that's what's going to drive me to respond. Right? That's the way I'm naturally wired to do child protection, and that is failing us. And it will continue to fail us Why? Okay. First of all, the energy and effort and urgency I place in protecting my child is driven by how big I think the threat is. All right. So if it's a threat that's this big, my energy and effort will be correspondingly this big. All right. Because we misunderstand the size of this problem, I never give it the urgency and effort that it truly demands. Okay. What do I mean by that? You see, I can talk about victim statistics with you all day long, but talking about the number of victims in the U.S., that does not, see, here's the challenge. Talking about the size of the problem by virtue of just numbers of victims, I'll break your heart, Patrick, but I won't make you change. Okay? I'll break your heart, but I won't make you change. What makes you change? Okay? Once again, it's that principle. My energy and effort is going to be driven by how big I think the problem is. If I don't perceive a big problem, you're not going to get my energy, effort, and urgency. All right. And the challenge in this, that what I have found is, in this bank of information, we don't understand the size of this problem, so it's not getting the correct level of urgency and effort from me to protect children. Okay. So what I want to do is I want to climb into this bank of information, and I want to test it. You see, most normal people, when I'm asking you to match up the energy and effort to match the risk, we don't have any idea what the risk looks like. So that's why I want to turn the diamond a little bit and give you a little bit of information about the risk. So one piece of information about the risk. In other words, we're going to stop talking about victims and start talking about the abusers. Okay?
Okay.
So statistics on abusers. Here's a piece of information most of your dads are not rolling with. Average male molester who prefers boys will have 150 victims prior to criminal prosecution. I mean, let that sink in. Average male molester who prefers girls will have 52 victims prior to criminal prosecution. By way of context, the average male molester begins victimizing at 13 or 14 years old, first offense, and the average age of criminal prosecution is 35. Okay, so it's some extraordinary numbers happening in a fairly narrow window of time. Okay, but for most of your dads that hear that and go, oh my gosh, that's stunning, why is that new? You see, you're a dad. You're tasked as one of your primary responsibilities on this earth to protect the children entrusted to your care. Why is your bank thin on one of the most dangerous risks that pose your child? And here's two reasons why that information generally doesn't come in, Patrick. One, it's awful.
Yeah.
And two, where are you going to get it? Let's talk about the first one first. It's awful. Now, why is that significant? First of all, I don't want awful. In fact, I'm living my life pretty strategically to be away from awful. So it drives me to choose certain neighborhoods, choose this private school for my kid, whatever, okay? I'm trying to avoid awful in life. And in fact, most people don't recognize that you have a defense mechanism that's wired into you, that as soon as we understand that information might come in that would upset or disturb us, the defense mechanism goes up to keep it out. And child sexual abuse information is one of those things that triggers that defense mechanism. Now, let me point out another just natural way where that defense mechanism kicks in. Okay. It's like, I don't know about you, but I love Jason Bourne movies. All right. I own them all, baby. If they get another one, even a spinoff with Jeremy Renner, I'm going to buy it. All right. But even though I'm a sucker and I'm going to buy it, I first got to go see it on the big screen. All right. The car chases and shoot 'em up's got to be big and loud. So I'll buy my $30 Coke. Okay. And I'll go to the theater. All right. So I love the movie that I'm paying there to go see, but I hate the previews they show me before my movie. Okay, so they got like 7 or 8 of these little 2.5-minute segments, most of them designed to scare the snot out of me. Okay, so they'll show me the preview for like Saw 7. I mean, it's like, who saw Saw 1 through 6 and thought that was a good idea? All right, and so as soon as the creepy clown with the butcher knife comes on with the music that's supposed, baby, I'm just like, Jesus loves me, this I know. I mean, I'll do whatever it takes to keep that information from coming in because I don't want the clowns in my head at night. Okay, So when information that's awful or disturbing threatens to come in, we have a defense mechanism that keeps it out. All right. This is one of the reasons why I can unapologetically ask you to drop that barrier and see, as a dad, this information has to be awful for me so it doesn't become my child's experience.
Mm-hmm.
You with me on that? See, it's like, I got to get it on me so it doesn't get on her. To do it any other way is to tell my child, baby girl, I'm sorry, that was upsetting me. You're on your own. Okay. So it's first just taking inventory of the fact that there are barriers that are up and the information is not coming in because of me wanting to protect me. That day is over. Okay. So it's like, okay, Greg, I'm with you. I'm going to bring that barrier down. Give me the information I need. I'm ready for it. The second challenge you have out in the normal world without, say, for example, the training that you received, Patrick, is where are you going to get good information? Okay, because here's another observation. Remember I told you how what we believe shapes what we do? All right, when I get into this bank of information that most of my dads are rolling with, here's what I have found. There's not a lot of information about a sexual abuser, and you won't get a lot of information about a sexual abuser, and here's one of the reasons why. This bank of information is generally made up of three avenues of input. One is our personal experiences. Two is the experiences of a loved one, someone dear to us. Three is the media. Now let's reference that information I just mentioned. Watch how this works, putting it to the test. Will your personal experiences ever give you average male molester prefers 150 boys prior to criminal prosecution?
No.
See, it's not possible. What about the experience of a wife, a loved one? Not possible. Trick question, what about the media? And see, the reason why it's a trick question is because if the media is the only semi-objective form of information we're relying upon, we will be dancing on the edge of the ditch all the time. Okay? Why? All right, well, let me show you something. I want to peek behind one curtain, which is the media, to show you how we're getting it wrong. And then I want to peek behind a different curtain to be able to show you this is where the good information comes from. This is where the true data about the risk exists, so we have a chance of lining up my energy, urgency, and effort with what truly is the size of the problem. Okay, the media. Here's how the media works. You've heard of a thing called a beat reporter, haven't you? Okay, just yes. A reporter that covers a certain beat, a certain topic. Okay, so you'll have like the politics beat. Can you say Ukraine or impeachment? I mean, it's like, then you've got the Hollywood beat. I mean, those are the people that follow the Kardashians around, all right? God love them. Right? Then you got your sports beat. I mean, it's football season. They're busy. But then you also have what we call the courthouse beat. Okay. And because our system is based on an open records, public records kind of, system, at least for the most part, here's how that works. There is a beat reporter that covers things that are filed in the civil or criminal courthouses. Okay. So if someone files bankruptcy, a copy of it is filed in the bankruptcy court and a copy goes in the press tray. When someone files for divorce, copy of it is filed at the family court, copy goes in the press tray. When someone is arrested, copy goes to the criminal courts, copy goes in the press tray. And periodically, the beat reporter for the courthouse will go to that tray, whether it's electronic or actually a tray, and start going through information to determine, is there anything in here, Patrick, that would make you go like this? I mean, just shock you, okay? So as it relates to child sexual abuse, that's a shocking topic, all right? But here's how it works. Arrest records. Ed, he's a sexual abuser. Nobody cares. He's a drywaller, okay? Sexual abuse arrest. Bob, nobody cares. He's a plumber, okay? Sexual abuse arrest. John, middle school principal, front page of the paper. Okay, that's how that works. Church leaders. Okay, see, what offends us is to know that a child would have been hurt in that program by that person of that position in that circumstance. It offends me, and that's what makes the front page of the paper. Okay. Unfortunately, the things that make the front page, when I say front page of the paper, I mean that figuratively these days, okay? But what they're drawing upon is the arrest record. Well, what's in the arrest record. Any of your dads that are following this and are in law enforcement will know what's in the arrest record is just what kicks off the criminal justice system. That's not the end game. So with the arrest record, that's when you get the situation like it's the 2 kids, molested on the overnight soccer trip. It's the 1 kid in foster care. It's the 3 kid from the middle school band director in the band hall. Okay, so the victim numbers come in 1s and 2s and 3s. That's part of the problem. See, we don't want this information to begin with. But once we start getting this information and drawing conclusions that help us understand what the risk really looks like, what are we drawing upon? It's usually a male, and the victim numbers come in 1s and 2s and 3s. Okay, it's never dozens and hundreds. So what do? I'm concluding that the problem is usually men. Golly, I don't want to imagine anybody wants to have sex with a child. But it's like, okay, I get too much information to not be able to conclude there are some messed up men out there. Okay, and the victim populations are 1s and 2s and 3s. Therefore, the problem is this big. And so my energy and effort is this big. And unfortunately, the problem is this big. So we're rolling into this fight with that Gatling gun with a pocket knife. Okay, we're not understanding the risk. Therefore, we're ill-equipped and ill-prepared for it. All right, that's the curtain that's failing us. The curtain where the real good information comes from is post-criminal conviction. All right. See, when someone is convicted of a child sexual offense, they're required to complete what's called the offender program before they're eligible for early release. Now, all sexual abusers want access to early release, which is why there's like a 98% participation rate in that program. And the first step in that program is the person having to identify how many victims, and it's usually supported by a polygraph. See, our system is trying to assess a threat level to decide if we're going to give you early release, what training wheels, if any, do we put on you, all right? So this is where the good information comes from, usually supported by a polygraph, but see, the media is done covering it by then, okay? So we're never getting access to the information we need. So watch this, Jerry Sandusky. You've heard of Jerry Sandusky, haven't you?
Oh, yeah.
But then again, you're from the Northeast, all right?
Yeah.
But even with all the information, you being close proximity to it, you know what university he was associated with? Here, of course you do. You know that he was coaching football. You know that he was hurting children. Was he hurting boys or girls, Patrick?
Boys.
He's hurting boys, okay? But in all of that media coverage we got, they gave you that information. How many victims do you remember the media telling you about?
Couldn't give you a number.
Okay, there were 10 in the indictment, just so you know, 8 identified, 2 unidentified. We heard about that kid in the shower in 2003, okay? But there's also been, just so you know, there's been 22 lawsuits. Okay, but watch this. Patrick, are there more victims than 22?
After what you've just told me, I would almost guarantee it.
See, my gut says yeah, but normal people out there, when I ask how many more than 22? Oh my gosh. Okay, well, watch this. If the average male molester who preferred boys will have 150 victims prior to age 35, and Jerry Sandusky was 67 when he was arrested, what can we presume?
I'm going to go with 300.
I'm going to go, right, the experts will tell you hundreds of boys. Okay, but you've heard the name Larry Nassar, haven't you? There's your gymnastics.
Oh, okay.
There's your gymnastics abuser. Okay, how many Nassar victims have we heard from so far? Answer, 360. Okay, why have we met so many more of Nassar's victims than we have Sandusky's? Because Nassar's victims are girls. Sandusky's victims are boys. See, boys, I don't care if it's $1 million a case on the lawsuits, that's not enough. Boys won't tell you. Okay, the girls, if the circumstances are right, they will tell you. And for elite female gymnasts, the circumstances have never been more right. Now, are there more than that on victims on Nassar? I'm sure of it, because it's an individual circumstance and decision as to where they are and whether they will come forward. All right. But now back to our point. The information we need is to recognize this is an enormous problem. So, gentlemen, we need to sharpen our knives and get out there and make sure that we understand that our effort has to match that. Okay, now, but let's go ahead and transition it. And by the way, One of the other biggest misconceptions is we place a very heavy reliance on criminal background checks. Okay. So I remember my kid was a super freak athlete, when she was 9, 10, 11 through her teenage years. I remember we were going to take her to a basketball camp. I remember we called the camp at Texas Christian University here where I live at Fort Worth, Texas. And we said, hey, what are you going to do to protect children from sexual abuse? I mean, we'd love to get our kid in here. It's a local program. We want to be supportive, but what are you going to do to protect my kid while she's in your care? And they said, we run criminal background checks, Mr. Love. Like, was anything else? Well, we run criminal background checks, Mr. Love. It's like, thank you for playing. Okay. It's amazing how when you take your kid to a camp, whether it's a sport camp, a summer camp, or some type of program, and I want you to get your people used to asking that question. What do you do to protect children from sexual abuse? If the answer is a background check and all they do is just keep saying it louder and slower, walk away. Because the reality of a background check is this: less than 10% of sexual abusers will ever encounter the criminal justice system. Okay? One of the latest studies that's just out is less than 4% of sexual abusers will ever encounter the criminal justice system. Now, what does that mean? Well, that means even if Jack Bauer and CSI Miami team up to do your background checks for you, Patrick, more than 95% of the people that wish to hurt our children have nothing for you to find, and they know it. Okay. Now, that doesn't mean we stop doing background checks. I mean, if there's low-hanging fruit or fruit lying on the ground, we've got to pick it or pick it up. It just can't be the only thing we do. So when I called Texas Christian University and I said, hey, what are you going to do to protect my child? We're doing background checks. To me, that's not enough. Because not only is it not enough, what I see that my program's doing, churches, camps, schools, nonprofits, youth sport, is we place a very heavy reliance on the background check. And so it's not only inadequate, but here's the combination. We close our eyes and rest thinking that's the solution to the problem. And when you close your eyes and rest, that is the problem. Jerry Sandusky would have passed your criminal background check. Larry Nasser would have passed your criminal background check. I would challenge you to pull up the latest 150 sexual abusers that are making the media in whatever industry, and I'll bet you 99% of them will pass your criminal background check, and they know it. Okay, now, I'm not meaning that's a dad that's like, let's all just get some bubble wrap and duct tape. Okay. It's just a soberly understanding how to navigate what doesn't and does work. All right. Now let's get into the varsity misconception. And the varsity misconception that really kind of sets the foundation of how we do it wrong and gets us kicked off on the answer of how do we do it right is this misconception. Sexual abusers have no visual profile. Okay. So that's the statement. See, we roll through life thinking that sexual abusers are identifiable. But the big idea is sexual abusers have no visual profile. Okay, you know what? I've just said it twice, but you know what I know? I haven't helped you. I haven't helped you or anybody listening yet, because here's the big idea. Even the example I gave you earlier when I'm sitting on the bench with my kid at the playground, that's what I'm doing. I'm relying on my visual cues to alert me to risk, right? Yeah. It fails because sexual abusers have no visual profile. See, when I look back in my world, here's what I realized. I grew up in a high-risk home. Okay? I didn't realize I was in a high-risk home because I was a kid. Okay? I had a single mom. She had 3 boys, and we were wheels off crazy. Okay? And we lived in a crummy apartment complex, but it wasn't weird to not have a dad in the apartment complex, Patrick. Nobody had a dad in the apartment complex, right? But in looking back and realizing that was a sporty environment, I started asking the question, well, what were we rolling with? What principles, guidelines were we using to make sure that we were safe? And I remember that concept, stranger danger. You tracking with me on that? You've heard that, right? Oh, yeah. I remember on Saturday mornings, right between how a bill became a law in Conjunction Junction, okay, there's this little vignette with the kids down there playing. Here comes some dirtbag with a trench coat, and he comes and he goes, will you help me find my puppy? Okay. And all the kids stand up and they point and they yell, stranger danger. Okay. And the camera pans out and the adults over here are like, hark, and they run to help and the dirtbag runs away. Okay. So even at 8 years old, what's the message? It's like, roger that. Dude slows his ice cream truck down and offers me a ride home. If I scream and yell, adults I don't know will come help me and the dirtbag will run away. It's like, got it. All right. I'm still looking for the kid who's ever yelled stranger danger. All right. But putting that aside, okay, is stranger danger valuable?
I would say to a certain degree, but it's not going to, based on what you've said so far, it's not going to help me as much as some other tools or some other knowledge.
Right. But see, the reason why I asked that question is whether if you really did spend the time to think about it, and that's my job to have to do that, stranger danger is the underpinning of what we do, not just as dads, but as leaders of programs, principals of schools. Okay. Stranger danger is the underpinning of what we design our efforts around. And I'm going to put that question out there. Is stranger danger valuable? Now, for all of your dads that are podcasting, here's what I need them to understand as a starting place. I want to give you a piece of information, take you to a fact pattern, and then I want to come back to that question. Because that is the fundamental question that we need to address in our bank of information. Here's the information. We're going to talk about 2 types of sexual abusers. All right. So actually, for those dads out there freaking out, there's 4 types. We're going to talk about 2. And the first type is your abduction offender. Okay. Now, the abduction offender may have no relationship to the child or the child's family, just simply sees the opportunity, grabs the child, and goes. Okay. We get the alerts to our iPhones. We see the signs on the highway, and we'll also get the news, report that night, and usually ends a few days later, and it's usually awful. Okay. There's your abduction offender. Right. On the waterfront of child sexual abuse, the abduction offender represents 4% of the problem. Now, contrast that with the preferential offender. Jerry Sandusky was a preferential offender. Now, preferential offender could be male or female, have an age-appropriate adult willing to have sex with him or her, but prefers a child as a sexual partner. Okay, and it makes no sense to me. And it's not just any child, it's a child within an age and sex of preference. So there's a narrowness to the deviance. So Jerry Sandusky, for example, boys ages 8 to 14. Larry Nassar, gymnastics, girls ages 9 to 15. Okay, so there's a narrowness to the deviance. Okay, but on the waterfront of child sexual abuse, the preferential offender represents 94% of the problem. Okay, Patrick, that is our problem. All right, so that's the information. Let's go to the fact pattern. Fact pattern I want to describe to you because I want to show you what we believe shapes what we do, gets us into the ditch. Happened at a children's ministry. Okay, so you've got a place where they were serving very small children. They were doing it in a horseshoe-shaped building. Okay, and that horseshoe-shaped building had a fence across the top of the horseshoe, so it created a little courtyard area. Lots of windows looking out on that courtyard. That was the playground for the little kids. So there's a bunch of chunked up rubber tire to make sure some kid didn't die if he took a header off the monkey bars. Okay, and there was a play structure. And in the base of that play structure were these little panels that create a little boxy area. Okay. So on this playground, with 2 staff members sitting 25 feet away, 6-year-old boy wooed 4-year-old girl into that play structure, that little boxy area, and victimized that little girl. Now, she goes home with her parents, and at lunch, she's very withdrawn. Parents are trying to understand what had happened, but she lacks the vocabulary to even describe to them what she has endured. So she ultimately shares enough, and the parents believed her. And don't think that always happens. Okay, parents called leadership of that church. Leadership called Kimberly and I. Kimberly's my law partner and my wife. We go out to that church that next Sunday, and we get there early. Get there while the ladies are setting up the playground, but there's no kids out yet. And said, "Hey, ladies, can we talk for a second?" They were pleasant. Said, "Of course. Can we talk to you about that sexual abuse situation that happened on your playground last week?" And both of them backed up and said, "That's not possible." It's like, "Well, actually, it is possible, but tell me why you think that." And both of them said, "Because we have a fence." All right. For both these women who love Jesus and love these children, Patrick, where did they think the risk comes from?
External.
Outside the fence.
Yeah.
What they didn't know was that 94% of the risk happens on this side of the fence. And see, I could have even gone to that playground a week earlier on that fateful day before the kids came out and said, ladies, I want to remind you that on this playground, we have a zero tolerance for sexual abuse. What would they have told me?
We don't have any.
It's like, of course, lawyer boy, I'd give my life for these kids. And you know what? I bet they would. But see, you have no information in your bank about the risk that your child is facing. Okay, let me come back to that. But now I can go back to the question, and I want to ask you this question again. Is stranger danger valuable? But see, now I can ask you the right question. Here's the right question. Will stranger danger help you protect your children from the abduction offender?
Yes.
Perhaps. Will stranger danger help you protect children from the preferential offender?
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not. In fact, it will disserve you because it continues to reinforce the idea that there's some visual cue to alert you to danger. Okay? Now, when you go into, say, your church, what do you do to protect children from sexual abuse at your church? What your church is likely going to tell you is, oh, well, we really want children to be here and be protected, and we do a good job. That's why we do background checks, child check-in system. We have a 2-adult rule. We have a 6-month member rule. We have an off-duty officer here, okay? And we have video camera. They'll make a list for you, but here's the big idea. They're building the wrong fence. What do I mean by they're building the wrong fence? Okay? The type of fence you build is driven by what you want to keep out. That makes sense, doesn't it? Yeah. Okay, Patrick, you probably own a fence, don't you? Okay. Yeah. See, it kind of works like this. If you've got a beautiful garden and you want to keep your neighbor's cattle out of your garden, the type of fence you build is driven by what you want to keep out, cattle. So the type of fence you would build to keep your neighbor's cattle out of your garden might be metal stakes and barbed wire. But see, watch this. You've got your beautiful barbed wire fence that is absolutely worthless at keeping bunnies out of your garden. Your barbed wire fence was never meant to keep bunnies out of your garden. So when I go into most programs as a dad, now I know more than most dads, and we're going to change that for your dads, okay? When I walked into that program about the so my kid's not going to be attacked by anything your barbed wire fence will protect her from. The barbed wire fence is in place at my church's camps, educational program, and the bunnies are ripping our ministries. Same is true in my homes. My family's got their barbed wire fences up, and the preferential offender is ripping my homes, families, and communities. Okay? So I need my dads to understand this fence is valuable to protect your child from 4% of the risk. We need to soberly understand what background checks do and don't give us, and we need to quit trotting out all our stranger danger efforts because that only is related to 4% of the risk. Okay? Now I can put all my metaphors together. The type of fence we build is driven by what we want to keep out. The what we want to keep out is the preferential offender. It's the 94% of the risk, okay? But now, what type of fence do I build? The type of fence you build is driven by what you want to keep out, and the what you want to keep out, here's the biggest idea of them all. The what you want to keep out is the grooming process of the preferential offender. That's how the math, you see, we're getting closer to the back of the math book now.
Yeah, yeah.
So even though it's taken us, 35, 40 minutes to try to help my dads understand, this is how we're failing. And if all we would have done at the beginning is short circuit this and put a bunch of information in about grooming, what I fear is what I've experienced for the last 30 years. When you're in crisis, generally you draw on the information which is the most comfortable to you. And the most comfortable information is generally the information that is already in your bank. So it's important to identify what is wrong, not only to get it out, but to now make room for the right information to come in. to allow you to understand that how is grooming likely to unfold in my community, my home, and the programs that my children are involved in. Okay? So it's, first of all, understanding this paradigm has to go. So whatever your dads are doing to protect their children from the abduction offender, likely they're killing it. Okay?
Yeah.
Because most of your dads haven't lost a child in a long time. Okay? That's generally not the risk. Generally, the risk is the preferential offender. And so now we're ready to ask and answer. And I know we're probably not going to be able to do it in this just one sitting, which is why we're already looking at sitting number 2, I'm sure. But it's to understand, what does grooming look like? All right, so let's go there. Grooming, because we're talking about a preferential offender, is not something which unfolds using violence. Okay, abduction offender, likely violence involved. Preferential offender, we're talking about deception and manipulation. Okay? Now, the preferential offender's big idea and role and effort is not to come into my world and start to make me change how I live and rearrange all the furniture in my world. Here's what the preferential offender is doing, Patrick. The preferential offender knows how I already live life, and the offender has found the seam in the garment. Okay? What do I mean by the seam in the garment? Let me paint a picture for you and allow you to understand. Here's what the abuser sees that we just take for granted, or that we miss completely. All right? Let's say at my house, if you came to my house in Fort Worth, you'd find that I live on a 2-acre piece of property. Okay? And it's a gated piece of property. Now, before you think it's all that, after 25 years of student ministry, half of Fort Worth has the gate code to my property, right? It's 0316, come see me. Okay? But when you come see me, here's what you're going to need to know that everybody in my world already knows. Nobody uses the front door at my house. Okay? So people will use the gate code, come in, park their car, they'll come up the back stairs, and then in through the sliding door, and now you're in the kitchen, and the Australian Shepherd named Lucy, she'll greet you. Okay? So only 2 times in 16 years have I ever heard that very uncomfortable sound of somebody knocking at my front door. Okay, so let's just say I'm at home this weekend, and me and Lucy, the Australian Shepherd, we're having some daddy doggy time together, and somebody knocks on the front door. Now, I'm going to have to calm Lucy down, but as soon as I hear that strange noise, what that tells me immediately is that I don't know you, but somehow you're at my door. And it's a remote piece of property, so likely there's only thing separating you from me is a piece of wood with nobody able to see what happens next. Okay, so when I go answer the door, likely I'm going to bring my aluminum baseball bat with me. Okay, but let's say that when I open the door, there's a complete stranger at my door. Let's say that complete stranger says to me, "Excuse me, sir, I know you don't know me, but can I borrow your car?" Now, what am I going to say to the complete stranger? Your face says the same thing my face would say. It's probably a colorful variation of no. Okay, I mean, I love Jesus, but no. Right? So let's contrast that with my best friend, Hal. Okay, my best friend, Hal, comes to me and says, "Hey, Greg, I know you and Kim are going to be in Atlanta next week. If I drive y'all to the airport, can I borrow your car? Mine's in the shop." Okay, what am I going to tell my best friend of 22 years who's been in a Bible study with me for every week for 16 of those 22 years?
Of course.
Like, no problem, bro. I mean, when you think it's all about you, actually, it's all about me. See, my house key's on there, Hal, and I'd like for you, if you don't mind, drive by my house and put some cat food out for Kim's cat. Okay? See, it's all about me. But see, what have I just done? I've just given you access to my car and everything I own while you know I'm gone. You could rob me using my own car, get a snack from my refrigerator while my dog licks you. Okay? The difference between this stranger at my door and my friend Hal is, you see, Hal is on the wall of my life. Now, what do I mean the wall of my life? Okay, it's like God has wired me and you to live in community. Now, we don't live in the same communities, but the community that I live in, it's like we're all standing on this wall. Here's my wife. Okay, my wife stands at my right hand. Okay, I find her helpful, trustworthy, and kind, and we do life together. Okay, my best friends Hal and Jim. Okay, my Thursday morning Bible study guys and her girls are called her 5 sisters. Okay, we in community do life together, and we protect that which is important to us from that out there, which is dark and getting darker. Tracking with me?
Mm-hmm.
All right, now What happens here is the guy at my front door who's a stranger, the answer is no. To Hal, yes, because Hal's on the wall of my life. See, when someone's on the wall of my life, the barriers of protection of my car go down. The barriers of protection to my stuff go down. The barriers of protection to my dog go down, and the barriers of protection to our children come down. See, the abuser knows that, and it's exploiting that. See, the abuser will never come to my front door and say, "Excuse me, sir, I know you don't know me, but is that your little girl out there swinging? She is some kind of beautiful. Can I take her home?" What am I going to do?
Probably hurt him.
I'm going to shoot you. We're going to drag the body inside and we'll figure it out. Okay. But the abuser knows you don't get access to my kid by coming to my front door as a stranger. What does the abuser know? The abuser knows the way you get access to my kid, the first step is you got to get all of my life. Then we do the magic for the abuser. Because as soon as that abuser's on the wall of my life, guess what happens? The barriers of protection to my car, my stuff, and my dog go down, and so do the barriers of protection to our children. That's what the abuser is working. All right? Now, how does somebody get on the wall of my life? Okay, generally, it's somebody that's convinced me that you're helpful, trustworthy, and kind. It's like, you come up to me and say, "Hey, Greg, I'm a dirtbag. You want to do life?" It's like, "Well, let me think about it." It's like, no. Right? But see, the abuser is going to come to me with this appearance as if I am the coolest dude in the world and belong on the wall of your life. And see, they're keeping up this fiction of helpful, trustworthy, and kind because the barriers of protection go down to our kids. Now, when my kid Georgia was born, my wife and I resolved, so much as within our ability to do so, our daughter would not be sexually abused. Okay, now I know lots of parents, lots of dads that are resolving that, but I know more than most dads. So here's how that works. When my daughter was 3, I know how somebody's going to give it a go with a 3-year-old. Okay. And because I know how someone's going to give it a go, I know what barriers of protection need to go up around my kid. Tracking? Mm-hmm. Right. But see, that's not enough because I live in community. It's like, how? Dude, I know you love Colt and Sarah. Here's the information you need about a preferential offender. Here are the barriers that need to go up around your children given the programs they're in. Like, Jim, I know you love Cassidy and Carson. Here's the information about the preferential offender you and Jackie need to be listening and understanding. And here are the barriers that need to go up around your kids. See, everybody on the wall of my life is sharing the information about the preferential offender and have the appropriate barriers up around the children. Now, here's what happens next. Let's say there's a dirtbag out there that wants to give it a go with my kid. Okay, what does that dirtbag have to do first? Get on the wall of my life. Now, is it possible that they can fool me? Answer, probably. You can fool me. And you wind up on the wall of my life. Now, as soon as you wind up on the wall of my life, guess what? My car is at risk. My stuff is at risk. My dog is at risk, but my child is not. And the reason why my child is not at risk is because the barriers are up and they're non-negotiable, even to the people that are on the wall of my life. In fact, the people on the wall of my life know those barriers are up and know what it looks like to ping on one of those barriers. There's a team ball here. My best friend Hal knows I will never drive up in his driveway with his daughter Sarah after soccer practice in my car alone. He knows that. I know that. Sarah knows that. Okay? Everybody knows what it looks like to ping on one of these barriers because they understand why the barriers are there. They're related to the behavior of the preferential offender, and everybody has the eyes to see and ears to hear when somebody pings on that radar. Okay. See, we've talked all the way around, now getting into what is the behavior. I'm going to talk to you about grooming in steps 1, 2, 3, and 4, knowing that we can't do this and finish this just in this one sitting. Okay. But here's what I want to do at 30,000 feet is to finish the thought I've already started. Preferential offender, the grooming process involves manipulation and deception. And the first step of the preferential offender is to gain access. Gain access. Now, I'm going to make a statement here that's not going to make sense the first time I make it, but I want to explain what I mean by it. Remember, preferential offender has an age and sex of preference. It has a narrowness to what that person is looking for or is sexually aroused by. Okay. Age and sex of preference is the driver. Okay. Not like a golf club. Okay. It's age and sex of preference is the driver. And what I mean by that is age and sex of preference is going to drive where that person seeks access. Put it this way. Say Jerry Sandusky magically shows up at my church and wants to work with children. Will Jerry Sandusky want to work with toddlers?
Nope.
Nope. He's going to gravitate toward his age and sex of preference. He wants to be in middle school, early high school, boys, if you please. Okay. So age and sex of preference is going to drive where that person seeks access. Okay. If it's somebody with a deviant sexual desire for, say, 5-year-olds, where is that person going to, that person will know where 5-year-olds are. Okay, what programs exist, what pre-Ks, daycares, mom's day out, kindergarten, okay, children's ministry. That person with that age and sexual preference will know where the stream of commerce is with their children within that age and sexual preference. Okay, so the abuser will gain access through deception and manipulation, and the first step in gaining access is to get on the wall. Now, that concept of a wall I've just described to you. See, our goal in this podcast is to equip dads, not necessarily learn how to protect our kid at Little League. Okay. Now, I want to be able to equip your dad to understand how I navigate these out of my home programs. Okay. And what questions to ask and what to see when I drop off my kid, what things should alert me that are grooming behaviors. Okay. So first step is gaining access, knowing that part of that plan is being helpful, trustworthy, and kind. And it's kind of kicking the pants because, see, I want people to convince me they're helpful, trustworthy, and kind. But why that is significant is, you see, helpful, trustworthy, and kind is usually the way the abuser is getting on the wall of our life. Okay? Now, the abuser is going to know what the child within the age and sex preference wants or needs or thinks he needs. Okay. So gift giving is a huge tool in the belt of the abuser. So if somebody has a deviant sexual desire for, say, 8-year-old boys, that person will know a whole lot more than I will about what 8-year-old boys want. Okay. What video games they're playing, what action figures are hip. If you told me that right after this podcast, we're going to have to go buy a gift at Super Target for an 8-year-old's birthday party, I would need some help. I have no idea what 8-year-olds want. The abuser will. If it's an abuser that's interested, say, teenage girls, it'll be someone who knows a whole lot more about Justin Bieber's hairdresser than I do, okay? Or what's on their Spotify. What I want my dads to understand, when I walk through the grooming process, I'm going to walk through it in 4 steps. Gaining access, selecting the child, introducing nudity and sexual touch, and then keeping the child quiet. The first 2 steps of that grooming process are generally behaviors that you're not going to see them for what they are. The reason why I'm going to tell you that this is part of the process and describe that to you is I want to make sure that in step 3, when someone's introducing nudity and sexual touch, you have a context for understanding the behavior that you see. I want to take away the idiot category as an option for trying to explain bad behavior that you see. So when somebody's in a closet, for example, alone with a little girl, that's not an idiot. That's somebody who's very dangerous. And I don't want us to try to understand that behavior without first understanding the context of the grooming process, that there may be another explanation for why that person is in the closet with that child, because I want my people to start seeing things differently. I want you to have the eyes to see and the ears to hear the problematic behaviors that are going to alert you to the problem at the earliest possible moment. In other words, I don't want to wait. I don't want my dads to wait until someone's nude with a child to know there is a problem.
Right.
I want us to see it at the earliest possible moment, because that's when I want to redirect. That's when I want to step into it, speak into it, because that's my chance to make sure this doesn't become my child's experience.
Well, Greg, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I mean, you just totally blew my mind once again with everything that you shared. And I think that whole piece about the two types of sexual abusers, the abduction offender and the preferential offender, was just very, very eye-opening. I think we spend all of our time, like you've said, looking out for the abduction offender and never really considering the preferential offender. And so I'm really looking forward to the next time that we're going to be able to chat, so that we can dive deeper into these 4 steps or these 4 behaviors that are involved in the grooming process, so that we can even further protect our children. And I think the information that you've shared today has opened my eyes even more, and will open a lot of the guys' eyes that are listening and watching. And so for that, I'm very, very appreciative and thankful, Greg. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. I'm sorry we couldn't cover as much as it's like 60 minutes is not enough to help dads understand what to do next. So let's do it again.
Cool. Yeah. And your assistant also gave me a link for a special training. So I'll put that on the site and in the show notes, so that guys can have access to that. And again, I'm very thankful for that opportunity.
You're welcome. Thank you for what you do for dads.
All right, Greg, thank you so much.
All right. Bye-bye.
All right, gentlemen, that's all we have for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope our conversation was a blessing to you, and that you leave this episode better equipped to be the man and the father God has called and created you to be. If so, then I ask that you please leave us a 5-star rating and a quick written review in iTunes. Then make sure you head on over to the show notes to get all of the resources for this episode. While you're there, you can take part in our 5 Days to Be a Better Dad challenge, as well as get involved with our free Facebook community. All right, gentlemen, until next week, remember Proverbs 27:17. As iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. Stay sharp.